Hey everyone, John with Hardline here with a quick review on Jordan Peterson's 2018 book, 12 Rules for Life, An Antidote to Chaos. Given the speed that things go in the media these days, this review might be coming a little late, but I've recently read the book and found it was worth talking about at least some. For starters, it's well written. All in all, the book was an interesting and pleasant read. To someone who's not a clinical psychologist or even works outside of academia, which I imagine is the case for most of his target audience, it reads smoothly, is well organized, interesting, and will likely be found in some way or another useful by its readers. To give a bit of an overview, the rules, so to speak, are all listed in the table of contents and barely speak to the actual content of the book. Most chapters are filled with a combination of research, opinion, and personal stories. For example, the chapter Stand Up Straight with Your Shoulders Back is mostly about the cognitive psychology of lobsters, not simply the benefits of good posture. Meanwhile, Do Not Bother Children When They're Skateboarding is actually mostly about anti-human sentiments within the totalitarian mindset. Even the title gives little indication of what the book is really about. As much as the book is organized into rules, and indeed argues for them, you could also pull out all reference to the rules and retitle it something along the lines of Chicken Soup for the 21st Century, A Glance at Psychology, History, Science, and Theology with a helping of stories, and it would functionally be the same book. Some key takeaways from the work include the importance of looking out for yourself, how to choose friends and goals, why honesty matters, the pursuit of meaning, some interpretations of religion without all the magic, the brutality of nature, and the danger of radical ideology. I'm sure there are more. The work is fairly substantive and did not get repetitive even by the end, but those are just a few off the top of my head. Rather than simply listing takeaways and rules, he took the time to explain each point either by telling a story, discussing a topic, or introducing a field and some key elements within it. Despite being what I would consider a good piece of work, the book still had a few important weak points. To explain, let me mention a few recurring themes throughout the work. Peterson opens and closes with what appears to be a great concern for both totalitarian and anti-human mindsets. These are the kinds of attitudes that are against freedom, ambition, success, as well as technology, and sell themselves on the grounds of helping those who lack those qualities. Despite doing a very good job pointing out all the historical problems with these belief systems, everything from tyrannical dictatorships to mass shooters, I don't see how he does much in the book to deal with or even weaken truly ideological actors. That is, the people who believe that their method will actually make things better for most people, or at least are skilled at selling them that way. Peterson repeats 3 sayings throughout his book. The first, that life is suffering, and that we need to embrace that about it. Second, that seeing your life as a curse or others in such a way will fill the world with evil. And third, that totalitarian or all-controlling ideologies will also always make things worse. In other words, he wants his reader to accept that life is hard, to value it no matter how unpleasant it gets, and to know that consolidating power will not make the hardship go away. If anything then, the work is a call for readers not to turn to collectivism or totalitarianism when they themselves are going through hardship. In essence, he sees that if you, the reader, are having a hard time sorting your life out, grand political ideals will not make life easier, but instead harder. The rules of the book, then, are rules that will help sort a life out without hindering those of others. The problem with this, though, is that he states as many, if not more, examples of people who fail in their personal lives rather than of those who succeed. For some readers, then, I imagine that this would beg the question, what if just living better doesn't work? What if this new pitch for a radical ideal works? How much worse would things get if it fails again? And what if it works out differently this time? After all, they say they're going to do things differently. To those questions, his main answers are that people who are effective at getting to the top of and running these systems do not really care about the worse off. He explains this at length in his section on how the New Democrats, also known as the Socialists of Canada, did not really care for the poor but instead hated the rich. All a reader needs to do, though, to dismiss that point is to take it on faith that his account of the party's inner workings are inaccurate. In other words, that they do in fact mean well, or at least that they're right to hate the rich, because they indeed do not struggle as much and have not rightfully earned their place. Another problem that comes up is his claim that life is suffering, something that he says word for word throughout the book, and seems to be more about existential and psychological suffering than the traditional material kind. A view that may well stem from his own personal experience, given he talked about losing sleep over the Cold War as a child. It too begs the question, what if most of the reader in this case, suffering is actually material? What if the biggest challenge is making ends meet, not reconciling my place in the universe or understanding people? What if my supreme leaders warned me about people like you? People who would claim there is little we can do about our suffering, but we're really just defending the rich or some other class. These questions are not really addressed in the book, and I can easily imagine that one might read the work and write it off as individualistic apologetics, taking even his stories about individuals struggling to sort themselves out as evidence that the system, so to speak, still needs to change. Now, Peterson himself claims to be apolitical, but is himself in public life very linked with today's political climate. In school, I met a lot of people who've heard of him, and only a select few who saw him as a philosopher or as a counselor. He was instead seen as a political figure, often with fairly extreme interpretations, while people on the right generally saw him as something along the lines of a conservative libertarian, especially given his views on the importance of religious history. People on the left saw him as a dangerous opponent, often labeling him in the same ways they have the American president, his supporters, and people who advocate for free speech. After reading the book, though, I would say that it shows, if anything, that he's not so much apolitical as anti-political. One of the main messages seemed to be that politics is not the answer. He doesn't just criticize one type of authoritarian, he criticizes them all. He argues that hardship and challenges should be addressed at the personal level or maybe by communities, and that politicians should simply be kept out of them. With all said, as much as my main issue with the book is that it seems it will do little in the political field to stop or help people to prevent the encroachment of authoritarianism, we might actually see this kind of work succeed at just that. Its author has been heavily chastised for telling the government to leave people alone. If people read into him and find that what the left is against are actually philosophy readings and self-help books, then that might actually open the public's eyes to their true nature. After all, mainstream news outlets, as well as academics, have been calling the guy a Nazi, despite that his life's work has been as a counselor and academic, and he wants the state to stay out of people's lives. Perhaps seeing that will open people's eyes to their true nature. Perhaps their attack on someone who talks about mental health and writes self-help books will be just what the public needs to see through their promises to help people themselves. Perhaps that, and not the book itself per se, will be the type of martyrdom that sets off a change of faith in the public sphere. With that said, I would recommend the book to pretty well anyone watching. It is a self-help book, and a good one at that, not necessarily a political one. It talks about relationships, well-being, raising kids, and making friends. However, it is also seen to be very political, and if we spread it around and get it into public discourse, it will likely become even more so. As much as I personally doubt that individualism on its own can make collectivism go away, seeing their leaders attacking self-sufficiency and personal growth might help some people on the left to realize that their leaders don't actually want them to be healthy, happy people, nor do they want them to find out how they can be. I'll close there. As always, more videos are on the way. The next one will most likely be a discussion of the now decade-old movie The Dark Knight. The Social Network project is also still ongoing. If you're curious about it, take a look at my video on it. It is still in the earliest phase, and I need all the help I can get. In the meantime, thanks for watching.